It's time for More Outdoors. More Outdoors is hosted by award-winning outdoors adventurer Chester Moore, author of more than a dozen books and thousands of articles on wildlife, fishing, and hunting. He hosts 2 outdoors television programs and is one of the most sought-after animal experts in the country. According to Chester, live radio is the most exciting way to celebrate the great outdoors, so here we go.
LVI, this is Chester Moore, and tonight I have the guest that I've been looking forward to having on this show more than any other in the 16 years of doing this program. I have Mr. Jim Fowler, co-host of Mutual Omaha's Wild Kingdom, legendary spokesman for the natural world, and he is live on More Outdoors. How you doing, Mr. Fowler?
I'm doing fine. That theme song brought back memories.
Yeah, it brought back a few for me, too. Pulled up next to the TV on a Sunday, and I tell people it's you and Marlon Perkins' fault that I've been working in this career for 23 years.
That's great.
Well, I'll tell you what, there are so many things I want to talk about tonight, and the heart of it is your heart for wildlife conservation, but we would certainly be amiss not to talk about some of the adventures with Wild Kingdom. And to me, one of the most interesting stories I've heard is how you kind of got the Wild Kingdom gig with a Harpy Eagle. I believe it was in Chicago.
Oh, yeah, that was, I had met Marlon Perkins early on. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't realize he had a show called Zoo Parade.
Yes, sir.
In the 50s. But when they asked me to come do the show, I had just appeared on the Today Show with somebody you all may remember, Dave Garraway.
Oh, wow.
And I'd had my Harpy Eagles on there, so I got a call from Marlon asking me to come to Chicago and do the first film for Wild Kingdom. It was almost a disaster. They wanted me to fly my Harpy Eagle loose in Lincoln Park next to the zoo. And, this is a 20-pound eagle, the largest eagle in the world, and it eats 30-pound monkeys for starters.
Love it.
I didn't want this eagle soaring around Chicago looking in baby carriages thinking that's the best-looking monkey I've seen. So I was reluctant to do that, but I finally just said, well, look, I had trained this adult harpy. I think I'm probably one of the first people ever to train the wild-caught harpies. But anyway, I had trained her to come to the fist, and you have to wear a big glove because they got feet on them that are big enough to break the bones in your hand. Anyway, I decided I would fly her from a tree, and if she came to me, then I might release her completely, because in those days, since we didn't have digital, you couldn't erase a line. We call it a creance. It's a pretty heavy-duty string that you can control the eagle if anything happens.
Yes, sir.
So I said, all right, I'll bend it. I'll lay this out so I can get it, and I'll fly her to the fish. Well, just as she was coming to me, all of a sudden she took a right turn. I looked over, and there was an Associated Press photographer with a look of glee on his face. And I looked further, and there was a little old lady with a little white, fluffy poodle who came out right there where we were. I don't know how she broke through the line. But, my eagle was going at one of them. The little old lady had the same hairdo that the poodle had.
Oh, no.
So I wasn't too sure. But anyway, I grabbed the line. It cut me right down to the bone. But I saved the life of whatever. I can hear that lady at the next ladies' club. I can hear her now saying, I was walking a little fluffy in the park, and a giant pterodactyl came out of the sky. But that would have been the end of my Wild Kingdom career, by the way, had that eagle grabbed a little poodle or her, because the Associated Press photographer was very disappointed.
Yeah, I can imagine. But, what a great start. And you say that kind of got you started there. But you had actually been to Africa and I believe South America already before you did that Wild Kingdom debut.
Yeah, I graduated from a college in Indiana, small liberal arts college, and I like to tell people that I caught a disease in that college, and they say, what was that? Well, this was in the early 50s.
Yes, sir.
Right after the war. And I said, well, I caught a disease, and the disease was that nobody told me what I couldn't do. In those days, if I want to get a big applause, I say, and by golly, that's the way America should always be, and everybody applauds it.
Yes, sir.
But it was true in those days. You know, you could follow your dreams. So I left Florida. I had been training eagles at an attraction in Florida. That's a whole other story. But a guy came by and asked me to go to Africa with him, and he wanted to do a film. And he knew I knew a lot about trapping, so he wanted me to train some eagles in Africa and all that kind of thing. So we almost all got killed because he told me on the ship going over that he wanted me to live trap lions. And so he wanted to be the first white hunter to shoot a lion in a full charge. Well, you know, those lions where we were in Barotse land were knocking off a few people occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
So in those days it was a different story. But
sure.
But we almost, I trapped lions and set up the whole thing, and he missed. He fell down a hole and missed while I was invited to the Chiefs. But that's how then I came back from Africa, and I was on the Today Show and went to the Amazon to study the big eagles.
Well, what was it that drew you to the Raptors so much? What do you like about the Raptors?
You know, I'm not too sure, but when I was in the 4th grade, excuse me, in Falls Church, Virginia, I wrote a paper in the 4th grade on birds of prey and falconry. And I must have had a little bit of something in my blood because I was always interested in birds of prey. And I remember when the war, when they bombed Pearl Harbor, I was in Maryland in those days, and I had a trained little great horned owl, and I had a hawk. I remember that very well.
Oh, wow.
When the news came out, I had them on the porch. So I had birds of prey through my scholastic career. And then when I got out of college, I found out through a person that knew genetics, genealogy, he told me that my name Fowler actually came from a name Fowler family. Excuse me, in the years ago.
Yes, sir.
In the Middle Ages, my name Fowler meant somebody that trained hawks, and that the symbol of the Fowler family was a glove with a falcon and a hood on the falcon.
Oh, wow. So it was right in your bloodline. Amazing stuff. We're going to come back here in just a minute with Jim Fowler, and we're going to talk about his adventures in Wild Kingdom and how he wants you and the American public to get deeply involved in conserving our amazing natural resources.
That's right.
Now, back to more outdoors with Chester Moore on News Talk 560 KLVI.
Welcome back to More Outdoors. On the phone, calling in from the East Coast is Jim Fowler. Of course, you know him from Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. Over 100, if I have this right, over 100 appearances on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show, and also a legendary Seinfeld appearance and a spokesman for the natural world. So you had Wild Kingdom in 1961, I believe. Did you have any idea, Jim, when maybe you filmed your first episode, what adventure was about to come into your life?
Well, no, it was, I hadn't really planned anything. I was able to do some things I wanted to do, which was, I was very lucky in that sense. But things sort of fell in place. And, when I first did the show, I wasn't sure that all these years later, like 30 years later, there are an awful lot of people that still remember our program.
Absolutely.
In fact, I think you remember when you were growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you have gray hair now or not, but a lot of people they still come up to me at airports, and it's very nice that there are so many people still remember our program. No, I was not aware of that. I was following my dreams, and I enjoyed doing the show because we got to go all over the world.
Now,
And, yeah.
Now, was there any particular thing when you got on this thing, say we have to go, or maybe you and Marlon wanted to go encounter this animal? Was there something that, like, when you did it, like, okay, we finally found that animal, we finally got that footage?
That's a good question, but you're reminding me, not to get off the subject, but, Johnny Carson used to say that I was the only person that Marlon Perkins could find who would do what he said to do. And that sort of relates to what you're talking about. We had a few close calls, but I had already been to Africa, and I lived with the Kalahari Bushmen.
Wow.
And, I didn't really care about the danger because I had Mutual Omaha Insurance.
There you go.
You like that?
That's a great plug.
By the way, my friends Mike Turner and Mike Romey are in Houston listening to this tonight.
All right.
Mike Turner is with the Mutual Omaha Bank. And but anyway, I've got friends in that area. Jim Forsyth is in that area. But I did alert a few people that I'm going to be on your show, if you don't mind.
That's perfect. We love that.
Yeah. So, but anyway, there were occasions I did find myself in an awkward position with a 22-foot anaconda once.
Oh wow!
I was in camp in the Amazon, and you don't tell people, Aboriginal natives, to get you something because they'll usually kill it and bring it to you dead.
Yeah.
They brought this big snake. I wanted to go film one, but they brought this big snake in the camp, and he was about as big around as a nail keg and 22 feet long, and they'd lassoed it and roughed it up pretty badly, so I had to put it in a hole in the ground, big hole I built, and let it be an even temperature. And wouldn't you know, I had a photographer who was scared to death of snakes, so he said there was no way he was going to film it. But finally, after about a month, I said to him, when the snake got back in good shape, I said, I'm going to go in and measure it, pull it out, you film it from over behind the tree. Well, my problem is that, and I'm not afraid of snakes or anything. I know how to handle them, but when I bent over to go in there, I had a stick that I could hook the snake's neck. It was standing about 6 feet tall, just his head, coming out of the ground.
Yeah, I've handled a 14-footer, but a 22-footer, that's another level.
That's a whole other level. And anyway, I hooked the neck, pulled it toward me, and then you got to drop the stick and grab the neck. Well, my elbow hit the edge of the opening, and the snake grabbed me by the hand, went all the way to the wrist without hardly opening his mouth. It was that big.
Wow.
Then I was lucky to know about what to do, because you got to grab this, in case this happens to anybody in the audience, you got to grab the tail because they wrap your tail first. So in the process of holding the tail, the snake tried to pull me in to the hole, and I turned around. My photographer had his hand over his eyes. He wasn't even filming it. He was just scared. And the snake swallowed my arm up to the shoulder. So, I got involved with that snake pretty well. But Brian Gumbel on the Today Show asked me once when he heard that story. He didn't hear it from me, but he heard it somewhere else. He said, Jim, how'd you get loose? Well, what you have to do is to force yourself to relax and not struggle. If you keep struggling, a snake like that has been programmed genetically for 1 million or so years to just keep tightening up. And they don't have anything else to do. They don't take their kids to the soccer match or whatever. So they can tighten on you and just stay that way if necessary for several days. So I was able to hold the tail, keep it getting wrapped, and then when I relaxed, the snake relaxed, and I was able to get it off.
That's definitely a harrowing encounter. Now, the image for the public was that Marlon always sent you out to go grab the dangerous animals. But I've read before where you said he got involved quite a bit, too.
Oh, yeah. Marlon was a real outdoors type person. He was the director of several zoos. The St. Louis Zoo was the last one. But Marlon was, people ask me about Marlon. I was with him a long time. But I never saw Marlon Perkins raise a problem or give a problem that whole time. He was very happy with what he did, and Marlon never tried to take control and all that sort of thing. he was a real gentleman.
Yeah, he certainly put that off on camera, you know, and that's great to hear. Now, one of my fondest memories is kind of watching you guys on several different times with elephants. But unfortunately, since those episodes were filmed, the elephants of the world populations are plummeting, along with the rhinoceros, which is even in a worse shape. Jim, what's going on out there in conservation? What are some of these things? What can we do about something like rhinoceros poaching?
Well, what we have to do is think of a big picture.
Okay.
By the way, I was on a conference out in California called TEDx. Mm-hmm. It's a very well-known conference, and my subject, I talked about communication. The theme of that big conference that went worldwide was called Tipping Point. But in that process, I talked about some of the new terms we have to use to affect public attitudes. The first thing we have to do is make people care.
Yes, sir.
Enough to realize that elephants should have a place here. So I wrote an essay recently. A friend was going to do an article for the Huffington Post, and I wrote down, and I started thinking myself about what an elephant actually needs. Now, there are people out there that are doing a pretty good job to make them stop poaching. Mm-hmm. Now, they have armed guards now, unfortunately. It's a terrible situation because there is a group that are killing elephants and then selling the ivory to the terrorists in Somalia and Sudan, and they're taking that money, and they're also doing their own killing of human beings. Mm-hmm. So it's a terrible chain of way those tusks go. Now, there was a show a little while ago that they put a transmitter inside of a plastic tusk, mm-hmm. and they followed that. They could get signals from it. And they followed it all the way up into the Sudanese area where it was going to go to China.
Wow! Yeah,
we have got to do something, and there is a way of protecting rhinos. By the way, I recommended this about 10 years ago. What we need to do is do an advertising campaign. There are people in South Africa that are tagging rhinos still. Mm-hmm. So what you do is you knock a rhino down, and then you take the horn and drill a few holes in it. It doesn't hurt the animal. And you put an insecticide inside the horn called paraquat.
Okay.
And then your advertising program tells everybody, look, take your chances, but the rhino horns are poisonous, and you ship some of those over to Taiwan, where a lot of it is going, and you use that advertising campaign to tell people that you can't use that horn anymore. And it's true, that paraquat will get to you, sold over the counter. But here's the point. They're finally starting to do that.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting? They finally figured out if they can poison the horn. So maybe there is some hope. But here's the big picture.
Yes, sir.
And I've started what is called the World Wilderness Project. It's part of a bigger education project that's, I think, one of my associates told you about.
Yes, sir. Think Big, Get Wild, right?
Yeah, Think Big, Get Wild, which is going to take place in Florida and then hopefully expand. But this is going to reconnect families and children back with the natural world. Tara Perry, Bill Hardy are doing a good job with that. But here's the point. We have got to learn to affect public attitudes more effectively. And with the elephant, I wrote this essay, and what the elephant is going to need, in addition to being protected so they can't shoot them for the ivory, the bigger picture is that elephant needs wilderness.
Yes, sir, habitat.
And the first thing because if you don't have wilderness, what I define as wilderness, used to be the elephants would migrate. And a lot of the roads in that part of Africa, in South Africa and up around Kenya, are old elephant trails.
Elephant trails,
they used
sir.
to migrate from the water holes down to where they had fresh food to eat and additional water. But now they've pumped those water holes so they stay in water all the time. The elephants are hammering the habitat. So, hey, one of the things I got for you, I've got a new definition of what an elephant is.
Okay.
It might be you would understand.
What you got?
I call them plant predators.
Plant predators.
How about that? Because you know what? they're doing with plants
Yep.
what the carnivores are doing with excess numbers of animals.
And even on a bigger scale, because I've seen these things eat.
And they can take a tree down if it gets too thick or there's too much underbrush. The elephants allow sunlight to come in and stimulate new growth, which is new food. So a buffalo is a plant predator, an elk, a deer is a plant predator.
I like that.
And I thought you might like that.
I'm going to use that in my next article. Say Jim Fowler's new definition: plant predator, white-tailed deer. There you go.
And once you realize how nature works,
Yes, sir.
that's exactly what's happening. I know plants in New Zealand, I've seen them, that have big thorns on them, but there were never any mammals in New Zealand. You know why the plants developed that? It was the big bird called the moa.
The moa bird, yes, sir.
And they used to pick vegetation off these plants. But what I'm talking about is that the plants are actually fighting back.
Well, they'd have to, you know.
They have to. There's a vine in the Amazon. It goes up a tree trying to get sunlight, and if it can't reach sunlight, it goes back down up another tree. So there's a fight for sunlight going on, and the plant predators, well, even the buffalo, they used to go on a 14-year plan around the grasslands of the West, and they would harvest that grass, but then they'd move on, and it was kind of a continuous cycle.
Amazing stuff. I tell you, we got to take our final break of the show. Come back with Jim Fowler, an incredible conversation. We're talking right now about conservation, the natural order. We're going to talk about how you can get involved and we can stimulate the interest of young people in the great outdoors and making sure that we are good stewards of our natural resources.
Now, back to more outdoors with Chester Moore on News Talk 560 KLVI.
This is Chester Moore for Premier Yamaha Boating Center, the Dawson Marine folks on College. It's a great time to get a boat because we're in a primo fishing time of year here on the upper Texas coast, and over on the southwest Louisiana coast, you can get a Mayak, which is a great bay fishing boat. You can get a flats fishing boat. You can get Ranger, the Cadillac of bass boats, and you get it with award-winning service department. And it's not just a location over here on College in Beaumont that you've known and trusted for years, but also I-45 at the Airtex exit in Houston, North Wheeler in Jasper, I-45 in Airtex in Houston, and of course, Corpus Christi, San Antonio, and Aransas Pass, Premier Yamaha Boating Center. Back with Jim Fowler, Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, many appearances on late night TV, on Seinfeld, but he is a spokesman for the natural world, and he has a project he's involved called Think Big, Get Wild. It's starting in Florida, going to go nationwide. You can look him up online at actepic.com. That's epic.com. And Jim, we were talking about, the situation with rhinos and things, and you mentioned habitat and just how important that habitat is. And I think a lot of people maybe don't realize just how much habitat something like an elephant needs.
Here's the problem. If we're going to sustain elephant over a longer period of time, we've got to realize that they have to have wilderness, and we're going to probably have to rotate some of these big wilderness areas just like farmers rotate their pastures, because the natural world can't take confined pressure. Right now, a lot of the people in Africa are fencing in the reserves, so the elephants won't come out and get their agricultural products.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a fight going on. But, I forgot to tell you when I was talking about the elephants and what they're going to need in the future.
Yes, sir.
It turns out that we humans need the same thing.
Okay.
So my article is entitled Long-Term Survival of Elephants and Humans. We humans require wilderness also, and we also may have to rotate some of our big wilderness areas and utilize them over a 400-year period. Once we pour concrete over half the planet, it's downhill from then on. And, my friend E.O. Wilson, who's really the guru of biological diversity and a lot of other things, he mentioned the same problem. When you exceed over 50%, you're losing it from then on.
Well,
we've got a challenge, a real challenge, to try to get across to the public why we humans need and require wilderness and open space and wildlife in order to have a quality life.
Well, back in the 1800s, Henry David Thoreau in Walden wrote, "In wildness is the preservation of the world," and that was definitely way ahead of his time. And, I need it. You need it just because it makes our spirits soar when we see an eagle or we hear a gray wolf in the distance or see a mountain lion or an elephant.
Yeah.
But people don't realize that things like wetlands are important for barriers for storms, and we need we need for carbon sequestration, all kind of stuff in the wilderness.
Well, we have to talk about the arguments. We're not doing that, unfortunately, because I don't know one conservation group and one zoo in America that has a spokesperson that's known by the public. Unfortunately, the scientific communities, of which I hope I'm a scientist, they don't necessarily know how to communicate to the public. They don't have spokespeople. Who's the spokesperson for the Wildlife Conservation Association or two or three of the others, World Wildlife Fund, others? We don't know because their main mission, but we've got to start getting an argument that's real powerful.
Yes, sir.
And we also have to stop letting the media present animals as something that are dangerous. Mm-hmm. The media is creating a phobia in America that these animals in the woods are dangerous, therefore you got to watch out when you go in there. They're portraying tigers. When Siegfried and Roy got bit, you'd think it was the end of the world. But we humans, interesting point, we humans are programmed genetically to be horrified by being bitten or clawed. Mm-hmm. Because at one point in our evolution, we apparently were in caves and we were food for the saber-toothed tigers and other things. But you know what? We haven't been programmed genetically to be horrified by I-95 or I-10 that goes through Texas. When it comes to machines, we haven't quite got it yet.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's a great point. And because of the media and working in the media, you see that people are a lot more apt to want to read a story about an animal attack than they would be read one about animal restoration. And the two, it's a very interesting dynamic because you have people who claim they love animals, but they also fear the animals. And I think you're right. We got to bridge that gap.
Well, in our program, Think Big, Go Wild, we're going to start talking about how to eliminate the fear. If we are afraid of things in the world of nature, why would we want to save it, So that's going to be one of the programs. This is going to be a very interesting challenge. We're going on Kickstarter, and I hope people will remember that because we're going to be funding a tour through Florida, and I'm going to be giving talks, and we're going to talk about some of these issues to young people and try to get them off on the right program. But we just have to develop arguments for why open space, wildlife, and wilderness is important to human beings. We've got to talk about that and not just talk about saving the poor animals.
Yeah, and that's a great point because you can even, get involved in saving the species. But if the species doesn't have habitat, there's no point because a tiger has to have axis deer to eat or whatever is in their area. And in America, it'd be the same thing with like some of our a grizzly. You got to have the salmon run for brown bears in certain areas. So it's all works together, doesn't it? It all works together. And in India, there are only about 2,000 tigers left up in the Assam. Yes, sir. We're trying, one of the ways you can help save them, we're talking about a lodge, and the local people who are killing tigers right now would be associated with the lodge. They'd be partners. Mm-hmm. So when people came to see some of the tigers that can't be put back in the wild in what I call one of my ecological parks, yes, sir, that money goes to the shareholders who are the local villagers. And, of course, money is really the key to saving anything, isn't it? Yeah, you got to have it. Money is an influence in the world. And this Kickstarter campaign is going to kick off on Tuesday, November 17th. and going to run through Thursday, December the 17th, and they're trying to raise a good sum of money. So you can get that information at actepic.com, and we're going to have more information on More Outdoors here in the various articles that we have through Texas Fish and Game and other resources, because it's a very important thing. I work with children all the time, trying to get children involved in the outdoors, and we got to get the next generation off of the electronics and back in the field.
That's right, and there are ways of doing that, and E.O. Wilson said he's not going to go around preaching about saving animals. He's going to talk in the natural world. He said he's going to talk about how enjoyable it is once you have nature on your list, and you enjoy being in nature. He's going to talk about how beautiful that is and how enjoyable it is. By the way, if somebody doesn't have much material wealth, if you go down a wild creek, and have a picnic with your family, that helps your quality of life.
Absolutely does.
Quality of life is one of the three arguments for saving the natural world. The other one is economics. I don't know if you realize it, that ecotourism, nature-based tourism, is way up near the top. Like all tourism, is a revenue producer.
Yes, sir.
And the third argument is pretty heavy duty. The fact is, people may not think about this very often, but I attended a conference in Washington called Natural Security. Every major social tragedy in the world today has happened because of a basic law of nature, and that is when you destroy your habitat, then you have and have-nots, and the have-nots want to have what the have-haves. So in Afghanistan, it used to be green. Right now, a goat can hardly make a living. So a lot of these places that are facing terrible, terrible social situations, tragedies, and violence, it's one of the main reasons they have not been able to maintain nature.
Well, I'll tell you what, this has been a fascinating conversation. What I like about the Think Big, Get Wild program, it takes technology with social media, but it inspires people to get outside and connects them.
Right.
And wonderful project. I salute you for doing that. And we got about 2 minutes left. Do you just have a final word you'd like to say out there to the listening audience?
Well, yeah, I would like to say, among you don't want to get me talking. It's hard for me to shut up. No, I mean, I know that you were affected by Wild Kingdom when you were young.
Yes, sir.
What I'm really would like to talk about at the end is that we humans have an opportunity to help promote a new series of statements and of messages.
Yes, sir.
Some of the old messages haven't been working too well, but let me just run one of those by you. We humans scientifically are very good at developing information, but we often confuse information and education. There's a big difference. Information is when you, in my opinion, when you sit on a hot stove the first time, okay, it comes right up through your butt, but education is when you won't sit on it the second time. So education has to affect your life.
Yes, sir.
And we've got to start thinking about how saving the natural world and habitat and world wilderness, why is that important to our lives as somebody working for a living, trying to feed their family? I've gone from somebody that put a lot of animals out there in front of the public and talked about them to somebody now that I hope I'm a spokesperson and try to talk to those people who are working for a living why they need access to the natural world to have a quality of life.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're doing an awesome job. Thank you so much for the honor of being on the show and for what you've done for wildlife and continue to do that.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Jim Fowler, that was one incredible honor for me. Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, he and Marlon Perkins, probably along with Jacques Cousteau, are the reasons that I do what I do. So make sure and check out their Think Big, Get Wild program with the Get Epic, and just incredible stuff there. We certainly appreciate the opportunity, and just are excited to be here. And we're going to check out here in a second, and I hope you have an amazing outdoors weekend.
Thank you for listening to More Outdoors. To keep up with Chester's work, go to kingdomzoo.com. Find him on Facebook or at Kingdom Zoo on Instagram. Read his weekly columns in the Port Arthur News and Orange Leader and monthly in Texas Fish and Game. And join us next Friday at 6 for more Outdoors.